A story about love and death. Perhaps it is difficult to think of a more disgusting weather for December. The thermometer has been at 0 for the 4th day. A fine rain is falling from the sky. Ice is insidiously lurking at the bottom of puddles, waiting for a belated pedestrian to plunge into the water with all his might. It's good if the clothes get dirty, but it can get into trauma. So, I'll start my story. That day I walked along the sidewalk like a sapper, groping with American boots for the safest way, trying to stay on the treacherous ice and shivering from the wind. Even the evening New Year's Eve lights were not pleasing to the eye. Comfort and warmth shone from the windows. It seemed that people were doing well. The family was gathered, watching TV, discussing plans for the holidays, and I'm walking aimlessly through a wet city. I don't want to go home at all. Who's waiting for me? Who needs me? I haven't been putting things in order for a long time, simply because no one will come to visit me. No one will appreciate my efforts and condemn me for the mess. Well, it'll do for me anyway. A girl in a red leather raincoat loomed ahead of me. Her black hair fell beautifully over her shoulders and streamed down her shoulder blades. The rain seemed afraid to touch this beauty. Drops of water flowed down her hair without stopping. To get acquainted, or is it not worth it? She's gorgeous. And who am I? A costumed watchman in the service of the armed forces. I stand at the checkpoint of a military unit in 3 days. And on weekends I walk aimlessly through the streets. A contract soldier. Yes, I get quite well, but without education, without any prospects. Who needs me? Or maybe take a chance after all. I quickened my pace and soon caught up with the stranger. It was as if her face had been copied from a painting. Huge blue eyes, clear pale skin, thin bright lip line and upturned nose. No, she'll send me. I walked another 100 meters at a brisk pace, turned around near the lamppost to admire the ideal one last time. The girl approached the pedestrian crossing, looked left, right. Oh, what a profile she had. Then, I remember, I was blinded by the headlights. Then a thud, screeching brakes and a red raincoat spread out on the wet asphalt. The Kamaz driver called an ambulance, and I blew more and more portions of air into her scarlet lips. I pounded her chest and pumped her dead heart like a pump. The ambulance arrived 5 minutes later. After I was dragged away, I stood stupidly and watched the actions of the doctors. Death came instantly. That's what the mustached man in the blue jacket told me. Every day after that I saw her in a dream. I approached her, we got acquainted, and a loaded Kamaz flew by, splattering her red raincoat. Sometimes she sent me, sometimes she told me her name, but she always stayed alive. Rena. A year has passed since those events. My colleagues say that I have become even more unsociable and silent. No, actually, I'm very talkative, but I talk mostly with the dictaphone. I walk down the street and speak my thoughts, memories into the headset, pour my pain into the digital bosom of the player. The headset is the best invention of mankind. A person who mumbles something into a microphone does not seem to be as crazy as a person talking to himself. Now I'm walking down the same street as on that fateful day when I met and lost my love. Lanterns and New Year's garlands always shine. The 15th of December, 2013, 1857, at 7 minutes to 7, she died a year ago. I'm sorry, Marinashka, that I didn't get to know you then. I'm sorry I chickened out. Heck, it can't be. Guys, I see a red raincoat and black hair in front of me. Marina, it's her. Frequent pounding of footsteps. Shortness of breath. Marina. Did the doctors make a mistake? You're alive. I was so afraid. Silence. You probably don't remember me. You had an accident a year ago. I wanted to meet you, but I was scared. And then Kamaz. And the doctor said you were dead. Silence again. How are they dead? Are you kidding? Yes. I can see you and I can even touch you. Here. So you're alive. Marinashka, don't leave, please. I've been mourning you for a year. You are the love of my life. Yes, I'm at least to the end of the world for you. Silence. Yes. Yes. Marina, I want to be with you. A voice that seemed to break into the broadcast of the radio station from another wave. Quiet. Lifeless, but definitely belonging to a woman. Then let's go. Crackling, static, crashing. Crackling again, asterisk, 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 I'm an ambulance paramedic. On December 15th, 2013 at 19:04 I received a call for an accident. The usual track, Kamas rolled out a young guy. On the road, craniocerebral, a lot of fractures. Death was instantaneous. The driver of the Kamas claimed that the guy seemed to have been pushed, although there was no one next to him. The traffic cops later told me th. A kind ghost story. It's cold, the first snowflakes are swirling in the air. Every crystal of snow seems to sing about the horror that permeated through this cursed place. The sun is shining, but it only reminds us that darkness will soon fall and the city will show its true face. There is silence on the streets, dead silence. Birds do not sing, children's laughter is not heard. A vile silence envelops everything like a sticky web. Strange people with strange names live here among the nightmares. While you might think that the city is uninhabited, but this is as clever a deception as crooked mirrors in a glazier's shop. Although no, wait, there. A girl wanders quietly among the empty streets. I wonder how she got here. I don't remember small children crawling out in this city during the day. I follow her like a gloomy shadow. She flinches when my icy hand rests on her shoulder. She turns around and her eyes widen. In surprise, no one. Who's there? The little girl asks in a trembling voice. My smile becomes wide, so wide that the seams on my lips part a little and a drop of cold blood flows down my chin. The girl can't see me. Who am I? I'm nobody and there's no way to call me. I'm a shadow. I'm an echo. I'm nobody. She stares into the void, and I'm already standing behind her. So I want to play with her brown hair, run my palm over her warm cheek. But I love to play. I don't want to give away my presence right away. I circle around her in a slow dance. She starts to get nervous, afraid, turns from side to side. She tries to run, but I follow her like a stream of wind. The girl suddenly stops and screams, "Who are you? Come out." I'm not afraid. Her voice is hoarse. The frost is getting stronger. It is so strong that even the air freezes and falls to the ground with ice crystals. I can feel her desperation. She's really scared. But I'm not the reason. I shake a snowdrift off the windowsill with a transparent hand and accidentally leave my palm print on the snow. She screams and runs to the place where I was standing. I'm standing behind her again and laughing hollowly. She starts running again, running faster and faster. Suddenly she turned into an alley and disappeared into the entrance. I stopped, almost bumping into the door. Then the girl leaned out of the entrance and put a yellow wool scarf on the ground. "Thank you for not letting me freeze," she says quickly. I'm holding my breath. The baby leaves. I hear her coming up the stairs, picking up a scarf. Yellow, how typical it is for people. I didn't let her freeze. Strange. Maybe she was tired and didn't have the strength to walk. And I drove her forward. Fear saved this baby. Grinning, I wrap myself in a scarf. It's really cold days now. The cursed dacha is a terrible creature. A scary story about the mysterious death of my parents at the dacha end. A very scary creature that almost caused my death. My parents bought this cottage for a pretty decent amount. They lived out 2 seasons in it, landscaped it as much as possible, laid out a garden and even dug a small pool under apple trees. But then my mother died, and the cottage was abandoned for a couple of years. Over time, the father recovered and returned to the dacha again. However, 4 years later he also died. They found him in a country house with a stopped heart attack, that's what the doctor said. I was not particularly interested in the dacha, but sometimes I went there, as far as possible, not letting it fall into desolation. And several times I spent the night there either alone or with friends. I have never noticed anything like this behind this dacha and the surrounding area. One day, after a hard-working week, I decided to spend the weekend in nature and went to the country. I spent Saturday lying on the grass under apple trees and reading books. And in the evening I arranged a modest dinner and watched 3.5 channels of an old TV. By the time the nightmare described below began, it was a windless, but already cool August night. I turned off the TV and was debating whether to go to bed or read a little more. And then, in the midst of universal silence, which you will never hear in the city, someone knocked on the door of my house. You will understand my horror, which twisted my stomach and made me feel colder than ever in my life when I explained the following. The door of the house did not open into the alley, but into the garden. To get to the porch, it was necessary to enter the site through the gate, follow the path surrounded by plum trees and rose hips, and at the same time bypass the house almost around the entire perimeter. There was no other way to get to the door. The site was surrounded by a high grid, which it was impossible to climb over, except to fly over. I could have assumed that the neighbors were knocking, but it was hardly them because, firstly, the nearest neighbors spent the night 2 houses away from me. Secondly, normal neighbors would still knock on the lighted window facing the alley, or shout from the street. And thirdly, I personally closed the gate at night for an impressive hanging. The lock is on the inside. So, when I heard a knock on the door, I experienced inexpressible sensations, and probably almost fainted from the overwhelming feeling of fear. While I was thinking about all this, the knock was persistently repeated. I crossed the room where I was watching TV, went into the room that served as an entrance hall, and froze at the door. There was silence on the porch, not a word, not a rustle. I gathered all my willpower into a fist and asked, "Who's there?" In response, I heard a faint, unintelligible muttering and some kind of giggling. It was unbearably scary. I thought I was dreaming, and I was having a nightmare. Everything was blurred in my head from fear. There was fog in my eyes, and my ears were ringing. After about 10 seconds, the mumbling stopped, and I heard a smacking sound. Such a sound is usually produced when voicing kisses in cartoons, or in a cartoon movie. I realized that the matter was unclean and I had to defend myself somehow. I don't know by what hitherto unnoticed forces I pulled the bedside table away from the wall and put it against the door. There was a commotion on the porch and they began to continuously knock on the door, mixed with louder muttering and smacking. I jumped out of the room and realized that, in general, it was incredibly easy to get into the house through the wide windows, just enough to break the glass. The only solution for me was to climb into the attic and drag the ladder behind me, which was also not easy, and which I also unexpectedly lifted up for myself in a couple of moments. I covered the hatch to the second floor and deftly pressed down with a ladder and some bags of junk. Once in the attic and catching my breath, I looked around, desperately thinking what to do next. The knocking on the door did not stop. The rest of the sounds were also perfectly audible, though the summer house was built of light materials for the purpose of leisure, but not defense. In the attic window facing the garden, I saw a pale light and realized that the porch light was still on. The temptation was unbearable. I jumped up to this window, leaned my face against the dusty glass and tried to see what was happening at the threshold. I didn't see the door itself, but what I saw was enough for me for a lifetime. I was on my knees, but my legs gave way so that I fell to the floor and cried. On the part of the porch that I could see, I saw a shapeless dark mass, shining black-blue in the light of the lantern. It seemed to be swirling and bubbling. Some appendages were constantly pulling out,